Looking forward to sharing with you tonight my journey, hence it's called Evolutionist to Creationist. And essentially, I'm often asked to speak on this because I'm one of those people who, as a scientist, came to Christ through my research and my study as I travelled the world. And not through a Christian education, not through, obviously a lot of people were praying for me, but I was resistant to Christ for the majority of my life, in fact, for most of it. And so I'm one of those people who they deny exist, a scientist who comes to Christ because of their actual research. And you'll get people like Dawkins saying that's not possible. But it is possible. Scientists in the past have come to Christ. I'm one, and there are many others coming to Christ now because science in its refined state, as we develop more technologies, increasingly points to the Bible. Leaves us as scientists very, very challenged. And we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place, if you put it that way, in having to make a decision as to where our faith lies. Does our faith lie in evolution, or does our faith lie in Christ? Hence we call it Evolutionist to Creationist. And as you see there, I'm a Creation Ministries international speaker, editor and writer as well, have been since 2016, once I gave my life to Christ and went through a bit of a change in who I am and what I do and who I seek to serve. That's all good. And I'll just put on the board here for the moment as well, just for you. I'm also a Director of Australian Christian Tertiary Education, which is until now, largely unannounced corporation. We've been working for 6 years to put together the foundations of an Australian Christian university, non-denominational Christian university. And you will, of course, this particular church will be blessed to know that one of our directors is a brethren as well. And so we seek that as ex-academics and ex-professionals to put together a proper university. Engineering, science, pharmacology, all the rest of it. It's also a research institute. So it's going to be very different to the other Christian universities that have come forward. And so, look, I won't talk any more on that. If you want to talk to me afterwards about that and you want more information, once we finish with all the CMI stuff, come and have a chat to me down the back. I'd love to share that with you. It is also a charity, by the way. So, and the amazing thing, I have to tell you this right now, the amazing thing is the federal government allowed us in our constitution to actually ensure that each teacher at every level must be a Christian. Isn't that fascinating? That we do not have to, in fact, we don't hire people who are not Christian to teach in this future university. And I'm talking about a big university. We thought we'd have staffing problems. No, there are so many academics who are Christians who are seeking another avenue of teaching. So I'm happy to talk to you later about all that. But Evolutionist to Creationist is the topic tonight. And as I said, I am a scientist, and I always love putting this up. That's not a picture of me in the past, it's a picture of me in the future. Because you would have been sent an image, which, from Creation Ministries, which has a dark colour on the top of my head. But now it's all grey. I don't like grey. I think I'll call it, it's a koala colour, isn't it? It's a koala grey or an Arctic. I'm not Arctic white yet. I'm a koala grey rather than just grey. And so that came about through medical problems that I've had along that journey since I joined Creation Ministries. I am not a laboratory scientist. That's why I put that slide up. I was not a laboratory scientist. I was, in fact, a field scientist. I was very much an earth scientist, and I wanted to understand how the structure of this landscape, why is this hill there and that valley there, and how do these floods occur, and how does dirt move? That's the word sediment. Dirt on the move. How does that occur? How does the current landscape get created by current processes? Because you're taught that today's landscape belongs to today's processes. I'm going to challenge that because I've travelled the world and seen so much and so on. I looked at fossils, did much of that, and I always grin when I look at microbes. In my midlife as an academic, I became a microbiologist. That was a crisis in my life. And I wrote 6 international papers on microbiology and then realised, no, get back to being a field scientist, Ron. Get out of these laboratories and back out in the field. And to do all that, I travelled the world. I lived in China for 10 years and learned to speak Cantonese. I lived in Finland and learned to speak Finnish. And that's an interesting language to learn to speak. Very difficult language because it's not one of the classic European languages. Structurally very, very different. But I enjoyed it. I worked for the Gaddafi government. And that's got a lot of you shocked and looking at me strangely now. But I did not work in that particular section of the Gaddafi government. I worked in sustainability, water supply, and environmental matters. And I do, whilst Gaddafi himself was quite a wrong person, he actually didn't do it from a Muslim point of view. Because in Tripoli, while I was there were active Jewish synagogues. There were Christian churches everywhere. To him, it wasn't a Muslim issue, it was an African issue. But he chose the wrong path, using terrorism to do that. But I did enjoy being there in Libya. In Peru, I worked there for some time as well, on the Amazon River, and enjoyed all of that. I did swim in the Amazon, by the way, and I enjoyed that. And you're looking at me rather strange again. Why? What's the word that's going through your head? Piranhas, yes. You've watched too much television. Piranhas in the Amazon do not eat people. It's only in the Congo do they eat people. So when you go to the Amazon, you'll see surf life-saving flags up and you can swim with piranhas. And I did, and it's good. So you can look at them underwater. They didn't eat me. I ate them with a Peruvian sauce. Beautiful. Piranhas are beautiful to eat. And so I loved all of that, worked in the Pacific Islands, especially the Cook Islands and so on. South Africa, looking there at Kruger and all those other places, and also across Australia and many other countries as well. These were the main countries I was travelling in. South Africa was fascinating. I remember being out in the field one day in an open four-wheel drive. Has anybody been to South Africa and you drive around to see the wild animals in an open vehicle? And you drive up to lions, they're right next to you, and you're in an open, there's no roof, and the point is the lion can't see you. They see the vehicle. And when the vehicle comes up and stands next to them, they go, well, you're not afraid of me. And so they don't bother you. And so that was rather interesting. But then we were sitting there once and a rogue elephant decided to have a bit of fun with us. He got aggressive and he started to charge the four-wheel drive. And I said to the gentleman, the chap who was looking after me, you better hit the accelerator and get us out of here. He says, no, we sit. I said, are you crazy? Look at this. This is a huge beast running at us aggressively and making a lot of noise. And he said, no, we sit still. And I really became scared. But at the last moment, he put his foot on the clutch and revved the accelerator. And the elephant realised there was a challenge coming from the car. And so it immediately swung just to the left of me because it realised it didn't want to fight an aggressive animal called a car. And it swung to the left and ran straight past me. And the chap said, there you go, we're good to continue. I said, no, sir, we need to go back to the hotel. I need to get changed. So just sharing with you a couple of funny stories. Was I robbed in these remote places? Yes. Was I arrested by foreign governments? Yes. I did time in Peru. It was interesting. I didn't realise I had to pay them a lot of money in a corruption period of high inflation. So I was shot at, arrested, drugged. I was actually drugged in China and robbed while I slept. I had a good sleep, though. I tell you, it was a beautiful sleep. And then even an attempted kidnapping was done, and I had to leap from a moving vehicle as well. And I tell you what, I loved it, all of it. It was exciting. Why was it exciting to me, and why did I go and do all of this in remote parts of the world? Well, let's go back a few years, have a look at my upbringing. It was a dysfunctional home in which I was raised. And so there was alcoholism was common, violence was common. And so it wasn't just in the immediate family, it was an extended family. So I did not learn how to communicate. I did not know what love meant. I did not know what a husband and wife meant. And I thought school, education is my escape mechanism. But unfortunately, high school became another place where I was abused again and by a teacher. And so by the time I was 18, I was quite dysfunctional, not knowing anything. So I wanted to go to university. I demanded to go to university, and I'm one of those few people who can say I demanded to go because I did not qualify to go. But I went to the local university, which was Wollongong, and it's very opening as it opened, and I demanded to go, and they said, but you're not on the list, you didn't qualify. I lined up in every course, and I said, I am here to go to university. Why? It was my escape mechanism. If I get a degree, I can flee this environment. And so what happened was eventually the security were called, and an elderly gentleman spoke to me and said, what's going on, son? I told him almost in tears, and he then decided that I could go to university under Act so-and-so of the university because my passion was so strong, even though I didn't have the grades. But he said, you'll have to pay for it, whereas no other student does. And so I went to work in the steelworks and worked my way then in my first year, I failed a couple of the initial assignments and so on, but by the end of first year, I came top. Why? Because this was my escape mechanism. And I wanted to know, who am I? What is my purpose? Why am I here? What's my identity? And ladies and gentlemen, I stress that because what do we see today in the young people of today who have been brought up in a sort of an unusual generation now where they're taught all of these false teachings? They also struggle with their identity, their purpose, their role, and so on. So I not only graduated, I did honours and went straight on to a PhD because they said, you are driven by something. And I was driven to try and find out who I am. That's why I took off overseas, roaming the world, trying to find out who am I. And that was a great experience to do that. Many, many years later, of course, after many years, and I was researching for 35 years, I came back to Australia and helped set up the Sunshine Coast University. But I now work for Creation Ministries, and we have one passion, 1 Peter 3:15. But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts as you see, and be ready always to give an answer to every man who asks you the reason of the hope that is in you with meekness and fear. Why do we do that? Because I'm here for one moment, tonight. I want to link with you, and I want to feed you with the incredible resources we have down the back. Why? What's my purpose? What's CMI purpose? Is so that you, with those resources, can link with other people, family members, friends, other people, and share those resources with them. Link and feed is what I try to do tonight in the trust that you will link and feed with other people, with what we have to offer you. And so that way we hope to be able to get out there because we can't be on the road. There are so few of us who are on the road with our educational qualifications and so on who do it, and we need support to do it, by the way. And so I'll just promote the Friends group. We have a number of gentlemen here tonight, and it doesn't have to be gentlemen, it can be ladies as well, who are what we call our friends. They accommodate us, they feed us. Colin here has accommodated me and done a wonderful job, keeping me warm and everything because I'm a Queenslander, and right now this is a cold environment. But the point is they look after us, and some of them look at the books, some of them store books, some of them act as secretary or treasurer, all sorts of things. We create them in all the major cities. If you want to learn how to become a friend, then go to the back and ask them, because there is a little brochure called How to Become a Friend, and if that really does touch you and you want to meet the group, see who they are and what they do, then here's another invitation to an event. On August the 3rd, they're going to screen in their friends group and invite other people along a DVD by myself talking about Fraser Island and how it's only 4,000 years old, not hundreds of thousands of years old. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to come online from Queensland and answer questions about that. So you're going to see a DVD interview about that with me, and then questions. But more importantly, you can get to meet the group and just see how they are and what sort of help. You might find there is a role you can play. So, back to Creation Ministries. We are online for you as well, creation.com, with over 15,000 articles. Do not type the word flood in. You'll get 2,000 articles. Type in flood when, how, why, those sort of things. It's not just science, by the way. There's so much there for children, so much there from a theological point of view. And the science that is there, by the way, is not for scientists. It's for the community. We write for you, not for ourselves. And I must admit I struggled with that when I first became a Creation Ministries writer. My first article was rejected 4 times because they said, Ron, you're not communicating properly to the public. And I thought, I've never had an article rejected by top academic journals. Why would CMI reject my article? But of course, I was not trained to speak to the community. And so they helped me through that process, which was great. If you want to see things more live and fresh and so on, we have Facebook, YouTube, and on YouTube are many speakers who've spoken, it's been recorded, and it's there for you. So whilst I'm talking about landscapes today and showing you what one of the features that brought me to Christ, there are others who'll talk about astrophysics, black holes, biology, you name it, the passion you have, there's bound to be someone who's produced a DVD assigned somewhere around the world just for you. And so go online, do not be afraid to have a good look at all that. And finally, we have what we call InfoBites, which comes out fortnightly. And the InfoBites, by the way, is an email that comes to you once a fortnight, roughly, bringing you up to speed with what's currently going on in society. Not just research, but it might be scientists protesting. It might be a movie that's just been produced. We will correct that movie. You know, when Jurassic Park came out, we immediately wrote a rejection of Jurassic Park because they didn't even get the dinosaurs right. They had a velociraptor. Do you remember that movie? Anybody saw a velociraptor this big and chasing humans and intelligent and all the rest? That species is not that big. That species is the size of a duck. But Hollywood loved the name. And so they copied it and made it into a human size. It was a duck with claws. That's what it was. So if a velociraptor, if you had actually met one and it came up to you and went, what would you do? Kick it. Then what would you do? Double roast it. Double roast duck, so beautiful. And so if you want to be on that, we have these forms for you. They're InfoBite forms. All you do is put in your email address and your postcode so that we can alert you of current speakers and future speakers coming through. And if you don't like it in 2 months, what are you going to do? Unsubscribe. Unsubscribe, okay? Do you think I'm going to phone you? No. Do you think I'm going to ring you up and say, look, I'll offer you some free steak knives? No. You're gone out of our system. That's it. You're gone. So that's what we do. And if you do sign up, by the way, tonight, you can also then download a free DVD as well of that. So, the journey. What happened to me? Well, after doing my degrees, PhD in the end, even a docenti, I went for 35 years teaching that evolution was correct. And that was, you look back now and go, that's terrible. But I believe the landscapes were millions of years old, and that the fossils themselves must also have been millions of years old. But I was challenged by so many different things as I travelled the world. I could talk to you tonight about fossils, which I did at another church this morning. I could talk to you about floods and all sorts of things like this, but I won't. I'm going to talk to you about landscapes, give you some beautiful images from around the world, just to highlight that as I saw features around the world, what I saw was patterns. Patterns that show that the earth was affected by one event, one catastrophic event. No matter where you go, you saw the evidence. And so I'm going to talk about sedimentary landscapes, is what I'm going to talk about, which is simply when sediment gets washed down, it solidifies eventually and becomes a rock. Now, just for the background, 70% of the continents on this planet are covered in sedimentary rock, and easily up to 12 kilometres or 16 kilometres deep. The other planets don't have this. So something happened here that didn't happen on the other planets. We've been to Mars. There's no massive sedimentary deposits there. So we know that this planet is unique. Sediment has moved in vast, vast quantities. But equally, when you look at the planet and fly over China and Africa and the rest, the plateau you see there's a plateau. That plateau, or those plateaus, occupy 40% of all of the continents. Now, yes, they've got some steep edges, just like the Great Dividing Range has. We have one steep edge and then a plateau. That's fine, they're all like that. But how come we have these incredible plateaus that have not been carved up? have not been sliced up. What's gone wrong there? If they are hundreds of millions of years old, you wouldn't have these flat surfaces, especially in Africa, where 60% of Africa is a plateau. And it doesn't matter whether it's tropical or temperate or cold. There are plateaus everywhere, kilometres deep of sediment. But you equally see there in there, you see those lovely lines almost going across there, the sedimentary layers we call them. They're sedimentary layers. I'll show you a nice image here in the Finke River that I was researching in about a year or two ago. You can see those lovely lines going across there. The Finke River was great to study, and I wrote an article which is in the magazine for you. There they are, those lovely lines. I went exploring in there, no cars allowed, so we had to hike in. I took a CMI friend, and I hope this doesn't turn you off wanting to be a friend, but he wanted to come with me into the wilderness, and he's not trained in field work. I climbed down quite okay from those cliff faces. He didn't. He went boom, 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 like that, and got to the bottom and said, I really can't walk much anymore. Now, whilst I'm a Christian, I'm still a true scientist. And I said, well, are you okay? He said, yes. I said, because I need to continue to walk for a couple of kilometres and get some photographs. He said, I'm okay. And I said, you okay with the dingoes? He said, yeah, I'm okay. So I went down, took the photographs and the rest, came back, and then almost had to carry him a couple of kilometres back to the vehicle and all the rest of it. So I'm a scientist, but I'm still a Christian. I love people, so don't worry. I knew he was safe and strong, and he carried a good knife on him as well, so he was good. The point is, wherever we go, we see these wonderful, wonderful layers called sedimentary layers, and I've highlighted them there for you to see. Now, there's a question I'm going to ask now. If wherever we dig, wherever we see exposures like this, road cuttings, all this, sometimes they may tilt. It doesn't matter. They're still lovely strata layers in uniform. They're uniform with each other. They're all around the world, wherever we go. When we drill down or when we use seismic imagery, we get images back from underground using explosives and things like this. We keep seeing these wonderful layers. I'm going to ask one question. Sediment moves across the landscape, doesn't it? And gets put somewhere. When it does, it buries the previous landscape today. So my question is, where's the previous landscape of this planet? Guess what? There is none. What we see whenever we look around the world, and this is a rapidly drawn, sorry, I'll fix this one up later, but if you imagine the green on the top being the current hills and valleys and so on, when we look down, we see these wonderful layers, time and time again. Should it be that way? The answer is no, it should not be that way. We should have seen past landscapes, particularly when they argue that each of these layers was put down by a different flood. Now, let me show you what we should see, and this is a very simple diagram. Hopefully you'll see what I'm getting at. Let's just say there's a past landscape. Let's now bury that with a lot of sediment. Boom, down comes a lot of sediment. Buries the past landscape. That then, exposed to the weather, to erosion, wind, water, would be reshaped on the top. New landforms would have been created. You see what I'm saying? And then we say, well, maybe some more sediment came down and buried it there. But let's say that one came down and another sediment layer came down very fast, didn't have time to reform. There we go. There's that. But we should have, and down comes the green sediment, and then it becomes eroded. We should see past landscapes underneath in our sedimentary layers, and we don't. No matter where I was in the world working, we don't see it. What do we see? We see that. In other words, whatever was there before has been totally destroyed by an event of catastrophic nature and global. So I became challenged. I also became challenged by those layers there. There you see it, a sandstone sits on a shale. Don't worry about your geology. They're two different rocks. Beautiful, beautiful thin layer. They're perfect running along. It's not just there. It goes over hundreds of square kilometres. Perfect. Do you see any evidence that that lower layer was eroded, windblown? Did anything happen there? No. Yet they say to us those two layers are 12 million years difference in age. So are you trying to tell me, I started to ask my colleagues, that for 12 million years the shale sat there, it was never wind eroded, never water eroded, no landslides, no rilling, no gullying, nothing happened for 12 million years, and then another rock was put on top? And if you think that's exaggerating, no, go to the Grand Canyon, as I did. You just see these layers. That's 20 million years younger, that's 10 million years younger or older. Yet they're perfect, and that goes for thousands of square kilometres. It's incredible. There's no evidence of landscape change, yet they're supposed to be, those landscapes are supposed to have been exposed to the weather conditions for 20 million years. Yet there's not the slightest shred of evidence that they have been eroded. So I was quite challenged by that. Let's take it a step deeper. Whenever you put sediment out there, whenever it gets washed away into your street or elsewhere, I can guarantee you that within a day or two, even hours, things are going to happen to that sediment before it becomes a rock. When the sediment comes down, you get what we call, and here's a big word for you, biotubation. And I've only thrown that big word in to impress you that I'm a scientist. But it simply means evidence of biology. Because you can see in a floodplain, the roots go down. Now, if you have sediment in your yard, you know what's going to happen in a week, don't you? It's going to be covered in vegetation, organic material, which we can detect. We have the science for this. Or crabs or worms will stir it up. Now, here's the problem. Biotubation can occur within hours. In other words, the layer, that lovely perfect layer on top of that new sediment, is disturbed within hours. And it's not there. But it's not there in nature. We look at all these layers, 10 million, and nothing happens. So now not only are you telling me, I said to my friends, not only are you telling me it hasn't rained, it hasn't watered, there's been no wind, there's been nothing, there also has been no plants growing. There have been no worms or crabs or anything stirring things up. Because if that is done and on a floodplain, we can detect the organic material. Yet when we look at these rock layers, we cannot find organic material. Isn't that fascinating? And I'm talking here on a global scale as well. There might be one or two more recent ones, but that's after, potentially after the flood. Another thing you see around the world are what we call polystrate fossils, tree trunks that just sit there in the rock, standing up. Now, these tree trunks do not have roots. Isn't that fascinating? They're standing up, but they have no roots. They have no branches. And it's not one like that. In Brisbane, going up to Gympie, we have millions of them underground. Millions. Now, how does that happen? Well, it stumped us for years until we found out simply this. Mount St. Helens blew up, and when it did, it snapped all the trees off at the ground level, took off the roots, and then either burnt or blew off the branches. And so all these trunks, like that, these trunks were then washed downstream, and they all floated on a lake like this, as they do. But before they sank, guess what they did? They all turned up like this, bobbing up and down in the water. Then they sank down into the sediment and stood there in the sediment, standing up at the bottom of the lake. But here's the problem. They are all decomposing rapidly in the water. That tree, and the millions you see in Brisbane and elsewhere around the world, did not decompose. In other words, not only did they go down and settle in sediment, more sediment came down in vast quantities and buried them before they could become decomposed or rot. They are fossilised. Incredible, isn't it? So something, as I travelled the world, disturbed me. And I began to think, let's put all of this together. What did we learn? I learned that sedimentary rocks dominate this planet, but not others. That's an interesting point. Secondly, there is no original landscape. So whatever happened in the past was catastrophic. And thirdly, there's no evidence of slow deposition of sediment because we do not see biotubation and we see all of these polystrate fossils. And I could give you so much more as well to talk about. It's not just this. I'm just giving a little bit to tease you to see what affected me in this journey. So I came to the conclusion then that a catastrophic global flood must have occurred. I said that to my colleagues when I was travelling overseas. And they said, Ron, we agree. We agree. The evidence is clear-cut worldwide. But please don't say anything about it. You'll lose your job and you'll lose the grant money. Isn't this interesting that even today, these gentlemen I worked with, they've not become Christians, but they still believe that a global flood occurred. And they won't say it. I did different because I connected to the message. How did I hear the message, by the way? Because this might sound strange to you. I did go to some churches in my travels around the world. Not because I wanted to. I felt I had to. What was I seeking? I was actually seeking in my journey to be a professor. And I became a professor in 3 continents. I was seeking to be wealthy. I wanted security. I wanted mammon. And so if I found a professor, my professor was a Christian, I thought I'd better go along to church occasionally and pretend to be a Christian. Did I want to listen to the message? No, not at all. And so I became, in some cases I'd try to do something else. Maybe go make the tea for the people or something, just to get out of it. Even when I was working with government departments, if I found the government department people were ministers, for example, in churches or funding me from Christian sources, I thought, I better go to church and pretend to be a Christian. Otherwise, they won't give me these jobs, they won't promote me, all the rest of it. And so I did go to churches on occasion, but for the wrong reason. But the seed was planted. And you'll be interested that when years later I became a Christian, went back to China, and I said to my good friends, you're not going to believe this, I've become a Christian. And they said, that's wonderful. I said, what do you mean wonderful? Didn't you think I was a Christian when I went along to church with you? And they all looked at me and said, Ron, we knew you were not a Christian. And I thought, oh, okay, was I that obvious? And I was. But there it is. God said, and behold, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. And so I completely switched my argument to that. Interesting, because I had now not just studied sediments and landscapes, I'd look at rates, distributions, volume, frequency, fossil abundance, sorting, role of sediment, everything, worldwide, with so many other people. And I came to the conclusion that the biblical story, the creation story in the book of Genesis, was more accurate presentation of my scientific data than what I had been taught at university. And so I then said, well, creation is true. How did I become a Christian from that? Did I want to become a Christian? No, still didn't want to. My upbringing was terrible. I didn't want to come listening to this message of a loving God, a loving Father. But I did one day, interestingly, on the Sunshine Coast, sat down with a team of researchers I was with, and I just made a comment one day. I said, I think God exists because of this switch. Boy, do you think you can say that in a university these days? Was I challenged? People were stunned because they didn't interpret that as thinking God exists. They actually thought I was a Christian. Now, I'm a professor, I'm dean, I'm research director. I was federal government advisor on natural heritage. I was a state government advisor. I was working for the OECD, writing how universities become more engaged in society. And I sat there and I said, I think God exists. Boy, did it hit everybody like a brick. And so I started receiving notes on my door, handwritten notes, ridiculing me in a university, by staff, in my own faculty, my own departments. Silly people. Didn't they realise as the dean I knew their handwriting? I knew who was writing these. Incredible. And then one scientist, a lady who was a biologist, decided to take me on because, as she was thinking, as she shared later, there was no tutor who was a Christian in the university, no lecturer, no senior lecturer. Here's a professor, advisor to the government, running a research centre, having 40 scientists work for him, etc., etc. She thought I was a Christian. And so she started to ask me questions that are difficult to answer. And I couldn't answer them. So what did I say to her? Go and read the book. Now, that's academics' answer to any problem they have. They don't have an answer. They're not going to say they don't have an answer. We're trained to go, no, go and read the book. Now, there I was referring to the Bible. She didn't have one, so she went and found one. She came back to me then with even worse questions, more difficult questions. And she said to me one day, why did God hurt so many people? I said, what are you talking about? What are you reading? Because I'd only ever heard the message in a church. I'd never read the Bible. And she said, well, I've just read the book of Genesis. And he killed so many people. And I remembered something about the churches. And I went, I don't think you're supposed to read that first. I think you've got to read them gospel-y things or whatever they're called. And so she went away and started reading all of this. And in the end, she just got fed up with it all. She was trying to help me come back to being an atheist, as she was, a total atheist. Her family was atheistic. She was trying to help me because she thought, I've gone crazy as a scientist. So how do you help the boss become better again? And so she asked all these questions and so on. One day she came up and said, I want you to take me to church. I'm going to prove to you God doesn't exist. I thought, what? I don't have a church. Why would I go to a church? So every time she walked this way, I walked that way. I stayed away from her as much as possible, but we worked in the same institution. Eventually, she just got fed up and just said, you will take me to a church. Well, I said, okay. Went around, picked her up, her place, said, right, let's go to a church. I'll tell you a little bit here. We actually drove to a church that doesn't exist anymore. And I sat outside, then I said, I'm not going in. And she said, why not? I've argued with you for months. We're going in to see if God exists. I said, no. She said, why? Because I was looking at the audience, or not the audience, the congregation going in. There was no youth. They were all really, really old people in a small church, and this sounds terrible, with their walking support systems. And she said, why aren't you going in there? And academics are cruel sometimes. We give terrible jokes. I said, I don't want to be in the youth group. And this is only 16 years ago. I don't want to be in the youth group. She said, you're just denying me. And I said, no, there's another church down the road, starts in half an hour. It's got a more mixed group. So we went down there and we had an academic argument in the middle of this church. As everyone was coming in, our voices were raised because academic voices do get raised when you're trying to defend your argument. She first of all said to me, this is not a church. I said, it is a church. She said, well, where's the stained glass windows? I said, I don't know. Sit down, will you? She said, well, where's the organ? I see a band. I said, I don't know. Just sit down. She said, where's all the wooden pews? I see lovely cushioned chairs. I said, I don't know. Will you just sit down? And so we're having this argument. And of course, the pastors picked it up straight away that these two strangers had walked in, an atheist and an agnostic. Isn't that incredible that an atheist dragged an agnostic into church? Well, what happened? We didn't understand the message. She said later, who's Hosanna? What's that all about? So, I don't know. She said, what's with the lamb? Why did the pastor keep talking about a lamb? So I don't know. Because I didn't know anything really like that. Anyhow, then the pastor decided, well, we've got a couple of new strangers in here who are really struggling with all of this. And so he said, I'm going to do a call for Christ. He wanted to do it in public. So he said, he did a lot of chatting about it and then said, lower your heads, close your eyes and raise your hand if you're going to give your life to Christ. Guess what she did as an atheist? Guess what she did? She put her hand up. Gave her life to Christ at that moment. She was so touched. She wanted to prove God didn't exist, and in that service that day, it came upon her that God did exist, and she had gone down the wrong track entirely. But then she felt a little bit guilty. She thought, am I the only one with my hand up? So she decided to open up her eye and turn around, and she looked at me. My hand is up as well. Isn't that incredible? That an atheist can drag an agnostic into church and both give their lives to Christ. Which raises the question for us. If God is going to this level to bring people to him, back into the family, what are we doing to help? You know what I mean? Are we out there proclaiming this? I don't mean evangelising, but linking and feeding, giving other people information that might help them. And so that was rather interesting that we both gave our lives to Christ that day. She no longer annoyed me anymore. So a year and a half later, I married her. She sends her love. She's up at our church at the moment. She's very much involved in the women's groups and so on. She's actually a trained CMI speaker as well. And she loves doing women's groups. So across Malaysia, where we were at one stage, in Singapore, and in Ireland, England and so on, she was giving talks to women's groups, children groups, and community talks. Not, as she says, she will not stand on a church here like this giving a talk because she follows very much a biblical foundation that she sits on. And but she does an incredible speaking and was eventually chosen to be sent to the Macquarie Institute in Canberra, next to Canberra, which you may not have heard of. It's a very secret-y thing. It's how do you take people, and they take 8 per year, strong Christians, and grow them so that they can actually serve the community better. She got offered a position in Parliament at that stage, and she said no, didn't think that was her role. She wants to be in ministry, not as a pastor, but as supporting women's groups, particularly women identity, and all the issues of wokeness and so on. So she's a great speaker on that. And so we then changed our lives. We thought, this is wonderful. This is great. We thought, this is going to change everything. We're going to be blessed. And we weren't. We were both terminated from our jobs. Isn't that fascinating? Terminated. That wasn't the excuse. Being Christians was not the excuse. They'll always come up with another idea. So we were terminated. And we thought, okay, we'll do other things, but I lost every contract from around the world, every consultancy, every advisory position. I was terminated from them. And that's the Lord going, it's over. Move on. But I couldn't get a job for years. And I was pleading with the Lord. And I remember one day, on my knees, in my study, praying intensively next to the desk, saying, Lord, please help me. And I just hit the desk, and the computer screen that had gone blank suddenly lit up. And I just yelled. And I yelled at the Lord. And I said, oh, Lord, you are kidding. I am not going to apply for the position of a part-time sales assistant in a Coorong Christian bookstore. I'm a professor. My wife Julie ran in and said, you can't speak to the Lord like that. And I said, fine, I'm not submitting a resume. I'm submitting a letter of intent. See how far they go with that. Well, the next day I had the job. And I had to then work for Coorong for years, but I rose the ladder again. Why was I sent to Coorong, by the way? It was very clear later when I left. Even the managing lady said it was very clear to them. You had to learn how to serve, not be served. Because you led a life where all these people served you, you had to learn to serve others. So I had to learn to deal with men coming in almost teary-eyed about marriage, potential breakups, and pray with other people and so on. I had to learn how to serve. And so I worked there for years, then quickly rose the ranks full-time to IC, and they then invited me to Sydney to take over acquisitions and IT. And I realised I was climbing the ladder again, not serving Christ, serving myself. And so I quit that job, did some work in some youth ministry and all this sort of thing, and eventually came across CMI. Thought I'd make a great entry into CMI, but then other challenges came upon us. By now we were virtually bankrupt, and we were at the edge of being ruined. And then, of course, the incredible thing happened. They found that I was incredibly ill. I had a massive tumour in the brain. And they said 2 weeks to live, really no hope at all. I was rushed to Wesley in Brisbane, and a top number 2 neurosurgeon in Australia decided to take me on as a case study to see if he could do anything. But they sat down with me one day and said, right, we're going to talk about all the complications. We start with death, then there's going to be stroke, or if not death. By the end of the 3rd page, my wife and I gave up and said, no more, we've had enough. I get the message. Nothing's going to go right. So, but what happened? They actually made some interesting mistakes. They thought they could operate by going through just a simple hole in the head, but it didn't work that way. They, in the end, had to cut the head in half. And so I've been cut all the way through here, round over to here. If you want to come up and have a look at that, you can have a look at that. I don't have a problem with that. And then they had to, of course I love saying this, they had to peel my face off, because you've got to understand with surgery, if you stretch the skin, it can't go back. And that's why people in the past, if any of you realise, there were people with stretchy skin because they didn't realise that skin can't be stretched. So they peeled it all off. And fascinatingly, my neurosurgeon was previously a geologist. So I said to him about a year later, I said, do you have photographs when you had my skin off my face? And he said, no. Well, we do. We're not giving them to you. Why do you want one? And I said, because I want to know what I look like as a fossil. And he laughed because he was an ex-geologist before drilling into brains. But it was a miracle. What happened was a miracle. It was an 11-hour operation. It was meant to be 3. They came across complication after complication. They cut the left optic nerve, but I can see perfectly. Used to wear glasses. I don't wear glasses anymore. Miracle after miracle. I came out of that surgery in record-breaking time afterwards, out of the ICU unit. And on day 1, when put in the ward, I walked off the ward, and they said they've never seen a brain patient walk off the ward, head wrapped up like this, blood pouring everywhere. And they said, where are you going? I said, I'm going down for a coffee. What's the problem? And they said, you can't leave the ward. And I just slapped my side where I had my phone. I said, you've got my phone. Give me a call if you need me. And walked off the ward. They said they've never seen anything like it. So they contacted the University of Queensland, told them that a miracle has occurred because I could also read one thing. Brain patients can't read for a month. I couldn't read the menu. I couldn't read these forms, but I could read one thing. Guess what it was? The Bible. The nurses were cheering because they were Christians, and they said, this is wonderful. We've seen this before. You will find a message. And I did, and it's mine. I'm not sharing it. It was the Lord made it very clear how I was to serve. And that was to serve him and to bring glory to him and him only. No longer following in my past of trying to make myself the professor and the top. And so they contacted the University of Queensland. They said a miracle has occurred, and a PhD was then done on me. And the professor and the PhD student sat down and said, what happened? You got 30 seconds. I told them. I said, the Lord. And they said, yeah, we've heard that before, but we're going to study you and find out the truth. They didn't find out anything new. You know, I told them the truth. The Lord had everything to do with this. And so I found that a bit disturbing because I had trained people for years to do PhDs, and all of a sudden I became the lab rat in an experiment because they could not understand how I had recovered so fast. And it goes on, there's much more than that. But the point is, even the hospital was taken back. They said they've never seen anything like this, and so on. So there's where the Lord steps in. And since then, I've been working with CMI, and of course, straight away, began to start up a Christian university to challenge the existing universities which teach all of that. So, wrapping it up, Creation magazine, the best thing we have up there for linking and feeding. What do we do with it? We subscribe, we read, and then what do we do with it? Pass it on, exactly. Carry it under your arm. If you go into a coffee shop, just hold it up to the person behind the cafe. Have you ever seen this before or read this? No. Oh, look, I have. Why don't you take it? And if you're scared about that, like I was on day 1, when there's nobody in your lunchroom at work, run in, drop the magazine on the table and run out again as fast as you can. No, seriously, just give it away. I did it in the hospital. I do it in all doctors' surgery now because I've got to go for MRIs all the time and ophthalmological surgeons still trying to understand how I can see. All of this, I leave a copy in there. Who wants to know about God? I can tell you now, people who are sick, people who are in hospital and doctor's surgery, they want to know about God. The best place to leave it is there. And we get messages all the time. We did it to our family. We gave them all copies. To this date, 1/2 of Julie's family of totally atheistic people have become Christians. They saw what happened to Julie and I, changed in our lives. They saw the magazine and they went, wow, okay. 1/2 of them have given their lives to Christ. Isn't that wonderful? In my family, alcoholic, violent, 1/3 have given up drinking. And all what I do, I said, this is my belief. You don't understand it? Go and read this magazine. You'll understand it. Because the creation message is the way we best connect with Gentiles. People who do not understand is the creation message, Gentiles. Just like Paul did, all through his writings, he's talking about creation, especially in the book of Romans. And so what I do is encourage people to do that. If you do it for 1 year, you get a back issue, a single issue there. If you do it for 2 years, by the way, and it is cheap, when you compare that to, say, Women's Weekly and those sort of things, you will not only get a back issue, you will actually get, I think I have it, no, I don't have it here. Oh, yes, I do. 4 magazines, or little brochures, booklets. They're great. We've been selling them independently at $5 each. 4 of them are now given to you free of charge as a gift. If you do for a 2-year subscription, you'll also get 1 year free access to our journal. So that's even heavier and more interesting again to our magazine. So you get the magazine, 4 booklets, 1 year's free access to our journal as well. To do all that, this form is no longer the form. I've come back from overseas and they've changed everything while I was gone, and that's not the form. Anyhow, it's here somewhere. You'll find the form down the back. All the Friends Group people will have it, and there it is there. That's the form you're looking for, and it'll tell you there what you're getting for free as well. And I strongly recommend getting all of those and so on. And yes, look, we have so many people contact us and say, oh, we've given the magazine out and people have come to Christ. We get these messages all the time. Interesting. I'm sharing with you what happened in our family. We've transformed our family. Even those that have not given their life to Christ are still looking at us and exploring. I've got a sister coming up. She hasn't given her life. She wants to talk about it. Isn't that wonderful when that happens? And the last thing I'll recommend to you is the Creation Answers book. There's so much down there for you to play with, and we can have some questions now as well. Creation Answers book is simple. It answers over 60 questions that you will be asked. Has anybody ever come up to you and said, are you a Christian? Don't say yes or no, but I hope they have, because you need to be living a life that is expressing Christ. And if somebody comes up to you and says, are you a Christian? And you say yes, and then they're interested at times. They might say, well, if you are, then who did Cain marry? Now, don't answer. Most of us are going to go, oh. Or suppose someone comes up and said, are you a Christian? Yeah, I'm a Christian. Well, if God created everything, who created God? And most of us go, oh. You know what you're going to do now? Get that red book, put it on your bookshelf. When somebody asks you that question, you're going to go, oh, I don't have time to answer that now. Let's catch up tomorrow. You run home, pull the red book off the shelf. There's over 60 questions like that, where we give you a wonderful short 2-page, 3-page answer, and you can go meet them the next day with confidence, because you have followed 1 Peter 3:15. You are now informed, able to help them with love and so on. So I recommend that as well. But there's so much more there, and our friends team can help you if you're looking for something for a family member or something else, a child. Oh, yeah. I did bring this one up. 5 children's books, scripturally correct, by the way, absolutely. Instead of 75, it's 45. If you're looking to distribute these amongst nieces, nephews, grandchildren, or whatever children, this is an incredible buy, but we only have them here. And so that's for you as well. We have free brochures down the back for you as well. Help yourself to topics that really interest you as well. They're free. And that's the Red Answers book that I've got up on the screen there. Easy to get and purchase. So I'll stop there, but I'll stop with prayer first, and then we'll go on a bit of a Q&A. Heavenly Father, thank you so much, Lord, that you bring us together this night so we can share your word, share particularly the importance of the book of Genesis, and particularly the message of creation, Lord, and how over the years that we've been challenged, we are now able to defend ourselves. We are able to use science now to point towards the Bible as being historical and truthful and foundational, particularly the book of Genesis. And we thank you so much, Lord. We ask that you give us strength to then pass this message on to others, particularly those in the Gentile world, those who have not heard this message, Lord, those who are still wondering and trying to explore who they are and what their purpose is and why they're here, as I did, Lord. We thank you for that you give us the strength, not just today, but for not even weeks, but for all of the future. We can do this with confidence, Lord, as you suggest in 1 Peter 3:15. So we thank you for that, Lord. And I, Lord, personally pray for this church, pray for blessings upon it, Lord, that it grows extensively, continues to impact upon the society, Lord, impacts and just begins to be challenged by being overwhelmed with numbers coming in here, Lord. So I ask for this blessing to be passed on to this church, to those who are doing all of this work, great work, Lord, praising you always In the name of Christ, our Almighty One. Amen.